When you think of someone famous or important, you tend to think of someone with a lot of money, power, and influence. And if you ever happen to think of an important Titanic passenger, your mind often goes to people like Benjamin Guggenheim or John Jacob Astor, two of the richest men both in America and on Titanic, and who are really only famous today because of the ways that they died. You'd never consider Francis Browne, a Jesuit missionary and amateur photographer from Dublin, as being the most important Titanic passenger of them all, but he was, and for one simple reason. He had bought a camera with him. Browne's mother died shortly after his birth in January 1880, and his father drowned in 1889. And as a result, Browne was raised by his uncle, and it was he who gave Browne his first camera in 1897, shortly before embarking on a trip around Europe, where he proved to be a natural photographer. He joined the novitiate at St. Stanislaus College upon his return, and he was ordained a Roman Catholic priest in 1915. Browne was in England in early 1912 when he received a first-class ticket on Titanic as far as Queenstown as a gift from his uncle. He boarded a boat train from London to Southampton early in the morning of April 10th, and like any tourist, simply began taking photos, including this one of unnamed first-class passengers. While on board, Browne dined with an American couple who they were has never been mentioned on either part, and they offered to pay for his first-class ticket all the rest of the way to America. When he asked his superior if it was possible for him to continue, he was simply told to get off that ship. So Browne disembarked at Queenstown the following morning, April 11th, as planned, taking with him a few dozen photos, including this one, which is probably the most famous of all his Titanic photos. These two of his first-class stateroom A37. This is quite a famous one, showing Titanic's near collision with the SS New York as she was leaving Southampton Harbor. This one is an interesting one, as you can see in the bottom corner that it's a double exposure, and you can faintly see the private promenade out of stateroom B51, 53, 55, decorated in various vases of flowers for the occupant Charlotte Cardez's birthday, which happened to be April 10th. This is the only known photo of Titanic's dining room. This is another quite famous photo showing 6-year-old Douglas Spedden playing with the top on the after end of the first-class promenade, which is quite often replicated in movies. And a number of Browne's photos contain the last known images of several well-known people, including this one, which has William Taft's military aide Archibald Butt standing in the background. This is the last known photo of popular mystery writer Jacques Futrelle. And this is the last known photo of Captain Smith. You can see his head poking out of the bridge wing cab just in front of the lifeboat. And this is another famous one simply because it's the last known photo ever to be taken of Titanic. After the sinking, Browne realized just how valuable and important his photos were, and he negotiated the sale of them to major newspapers around the world. But he kept the negatives for himself. But as interest in Titanic faded, so did interest in his photos, and the negatives were considered lost until 1986, 26 years after Father Browne's death, when they were discovered by accident in a footlocker that once belonged to Browne in the Irish Jesuit archives. They were brought to the attention of publishers, and since then 23 volumes of some 42,000 photos that he had taken over the course of his life has since been published. In London, England's The Sunday Times referred to the discovery of the photos as the photographic equivalent of the Dead Sea Scrolls. And no doubt there were other Titanic passengers who had brought cameras with them. 2 passengers were even known to have brought motion picture cameras on board with them, but none of these images are known to have survived. And this is where Father Browne's importance as a Titanic passenger really comes into play. When he disembarked at Queenstown, he brought with him the only known photographs that were taken on Titanic, and because of that, there they're the only way we have knowing what life was really like on Titanic, and they bring a whole new perspective to one of the greatest and most famous tragedies in human history.